In our postmodern age of division, anger, anxiety, and confusion, the most dangerous weapon you have is your own mind.
Take control! Question everything!
This is the Intellectual Freedom Podcast.
Welcome back to the Intellectual Freedom Podcast. I'm Dr. David Hopkins, and we are continuing our deep dive into the most important book ever written, in my opinion, Plato's Republic. If you were with us for the first couple of episodes, you know the drill. We aren't reading this book to pass a quiz. We're reading it to build a mind that is hard to manipulate, hard to confuse, and hard to control. We are reading to push into tough intellectual spaces to better understand the world and ourselves. And today, we're taking on book number 3. And let me be honest with you, there are some scholars, critics, or people that kind of just want to skim through this chapter. They look at thematic overviews and think, oh, this is the music and gymnastics book, and think, oh, great. Choir practice, PE classes. I'm just going to skip ahead to the philosophy. Well, that isn't true. It's just not obviously true that that's the case. I mean, we're going to talk about that, but there's way much more in there. So we won't be skipping over this chapter even a little bit, because book 3 is not about a school curriculum. Book 3 is the first manual in human history on psychological warfare. It's a master class on neuroplasticity, and it's a warning, a terrifyingly accurate warning, actually, that if you do not control the software running in your brain, someone else will. So grab your coffee, settle into your chair, or settle back in your commute or wherever you're listening, because today we are programming our biocomputer. But before we get there, let's just recap how we got there. In case you're just joining, make sure everybody here is on the same spot, on the same bus. And if you're just joining us, here's a 60-second catch up. In book 1, Socrates gets into a couple verbal fistfights. First, who shoots down he shoots down the super soft definition that justice is quote unquote just being a good person. You know, the don't lie, I don't cheat, I don't steal, so thus I'm good person. That generalized concept of justice, that was shut down. It's just too superficial. It's too superficial for Socrates, and it should be too superficial for you too. Then we get to another definition of justice, and it's more of a tribalist type of form of justice. And we get one of the individuals talking about, justice is just a way to protect and be good to your friends, your family, your tribe, and then you do the exact opposite to your enemies. That's justice. Well, that was just roundly discarded as well by Socrates. And then comes the main event of a guy named Thrasymachus, who argued that justice is the advantage of the stronger. Basically, might makes right. If you have the power, you make the rules. And there is some value in that, right? There is some honest truth in that, but Socrates shot him down too. And at the end of book 1, nobody's satisfied. Then we go into book 2, a couple other verbal combatants step up, Glaucon and Adamantus, and they challenge Socrates. They challenged him with the famous ring of Gyges, and I hope you enjoyed that. They asked Socrates, so if you had a ring that made you invisible, so you could steal, cheat, kill, basically do whatever you want with zero consequences, would you still do the right thing? Would you still be a quote unquote good person? They demanded that Socrates prove that justice is good in itself, not just because you have to be good or because society tells you have to be good, and that actually justice is good for your soul, not just for your reputation. So Socrates realized this was a huge task. The human soul is too small, too dark to see clearly. Oh, and this was tough. And if you missed that episode, go back and listen. It's worth your time. But But hey, in the end, he proposes a different method to figure out this justice thing. And he says, guys, let's take a step back here because it doesn't seem like we're getting anywhere right now, just looking at trying to solve justice on the individual level. So he said, let's do this instead. Let's build a city, a just city in speech. Because, if we can find justice in a large, massive city, the macro version, maybe then we can find it in the tiny human soul, the micro. If we do that, maybe we can make sense of this whole thing. And they all agree. They all agree. So they're like, hey, let's start building this city. And they built a healthy city based on needs. They built a feverish city based on luxury, meat, perfumes, and couches and all the material things. And then and Socrates pointed out a brutal truth. Once you want luxury, you need more land, and that means war. And if you have war, you can't just have farmers fighting with pitchforks. You need professionals. You need guardians. And this is where we left off. We defined the guardian as kind of like a philosophical dog, someone gentle to their friends and the citizens, but ferocious enough to defend and protect the civilization from enemies. But here's a problem we face today in book 3. You can't just hire people like that on LinkedIn, right? They're just not readily available everywhere you go, so we have to grow them. We have to engineer them. And that is what book 3 is talking about. It's a sort of engineering manual for the human soul. And it gives us insight into Socrates and Plato and their idea of a human and how to engineer a good and just human. So let's set the scene, or at least as I see it in my mind's eye. When you read it, you may vision it a little different, but I'm kind of envision, the wine's flowing. It's dusk. Socrates turns to Adamantus, who's kind of the serious, the sober one in the group, and he pulls out a red pen, and he basically says they have the scrolls of Homer in front of them. And now you have to understand something when they pull out Homer. To the Greeks, Homer was sort of like the Bible. He was their verified authority figure, their scripture, their history, all wrapped up in one. And Socrates starts crossing things out. He says, if we want our guardians to be brave, we have to cut this line where Achilles is crying. If we want them to be disciplined, we have to cut this line where Zeus is laughing uncontrollable. Why? Is Socrates some sort of a prude? Is he the original cancel culture guy? No. He is terrified of a psychological force called mimosis. Imitation, if we want to say it in kind of plainer terms. Socrates, through Plato. Oh, let me just take one little step back here for just a second. I have to say this every once in a while. So our friend Socrates, he's the protagonist in the book, right? He's the main figure, but we are getting Socrates through the eyes of Plato, through the eyes of this amazing figure. Yes, Plato was, I would say, the student of Socrates, but when the Republic was written, Plato was not a child. He was no intellectual lightweight. He was a grown man at this point with grown and mature ideas beyond his teacher. And although, of course, his teacher had a profound impact on him. So keep this in mind. We're hearing Socrates and we're hearing the voice of Socrates through the words of Plato. I always like to mention that because sometimes I can get a little confusing on that. But anyway, back to Socrates. Socrates is arguing that we don't just watch stories. We absorb them. And he believes the human soul is porous. And if you watch a character on stage who is emotionally unstable, greedy, or wailing in grief, you aren't just being entertained, you're actually rehearsing those emotions. So listen to what Adamantus says inside of the Republic. He says, quote, "Do you never observe how imitations, beginning early in youth and continuing far into life, at length grow into habits and become a second nature, affecting body, voice, and mind," end quote. Catch that part, affecting body, voice, and mind. Boom. There it is. He's saying this: you become what you watch. Now you might say, come on, Dr. Hopkins, that's ancient superstition. I can watch a violent movie and not become a violent person. I mean, in a sense, yes, but really, let's look at the science on this. And in the 1990s, neuroscientists discovered something called mirror neurons. They found that when you watch someone perform an action, say throwing a ball or crying in pain, the exact same neurons fire in your brain as if you were doing it. You are biologically simulating the experience. Now, let's just go to athletics for one moment. Let's look at basketball. Michael Jordan bursts on the scene, right? Just bursts on the scene. Plays the game in a way we hadn't really seen before, but we kind of did in a certain sense with Dr. J. And then along comes a little later someone by the name of Kobe Bryant. And Kobe Bryant basically patterned his game after some of the moves and the mannerisms and the styles and the competitiveness of Michael Jordan. And then even comes LeBron James. And so we do watch actions, we mimic them, we mirror them. I'll give you a more terrifying example of this recently with, and you may have heard of this, the tick-tock tick. Tick-tock tick. It was an outbreak in 2021. Doctors started seeing teenage girls flooding into clinics with severe Tourette's-like tics. They were jerking their heads, they were shouting out words, but they didn't have Tourette's. What did they have? They had mimosas. They'd been binge watching Tourette's influencers on TikTok for hours a day, and their brains, their biocomputers, literally downloaded the pathology. See, Plato saw this 2,400 years ago. He's basically telling us, if you let your guardians watch hysterical, broken people, crying people, weak people, crazy people, you're going to break their operating system. Oh, so another amazing figure I've studied a lot, is I find him just fascinating, is Alexander the Great. So Alexander the Great, it was first prophesied on his head as a baby that he would become someday one of the greatest rulers in the world. Oh, and then just for good measure, after he was a teenager, his mom kind of drops a bomb on him that his dad isn't King Philip. Instead, he's a descendant of the great warrior Achilles, in essence making Alexander a demigod, which in those things was actually a thing. But imagine that your mind is filled that you will be a great warrior and a god. Imagine how that would shape, expand, push your mind, push your physicality, push things to different levels. Story after story. And if you're an educator, you hear them. If a child always hears, you're dumb, you're not smart, you're not good, you're never going to amount to anything, guess what can happen? They start to believe it. But Alexander, my goodness, Alexander basically eventually conquers what is almost the entirety of the known world. I mean, what you put into your mind can and does shape your life. I want to say that again because I want to make sure you get it. What you put into your mind, what you watch, what you listen to, the people that you hang around, college students, young adults, who you hang around can and does shape your life. My question to you is, what are you downloading into your mind? What do you scroll through, read, consume, and watch? Are those things expanding your mind and your life? Or are they shrinking your mind and life? Just think about it. Think about it for a minute. Audit your social feeds. Audit your Netflix queue. Are you watching people who are anxious, cynical, fragile? Because if you are, your mirror neurons are firing and you may not even realize that you are practicing their neurosis. And eventually, you may become it. The older I get, be transparent with you here, the older I get, the less time I have for victims. And I work in child welfare. I work trying to protect child trafficked children that are trafficked, human trafficking survivors. And my heart breaks for them. My heart breaks for the least of us in our society, our foster kids and those that don't have anything. And so when I say that, it might sound harsh, but you know what? Who I don't have time for? I don't have time for the, oh, woe is me, life isn't fair. This politician or that politician is going to end the world. I can't get ahead. I just really, I don't have time for it because it's out there in droves. So what I've really become almost militant about is trying to control my space, trying to control things that I focus on, things that I can and do control and leave the rest out. Because if it does impact my mind, my focus, my attitude, and really what Socrates is trying to say is that humans will mimic what they consume. So if we want to build a strong, vibrant, just community, Socrates is saying, well, let's be careful what our quote unquote people are consuming. They get into another side conversation about the symptoms of rot in a society. And he pivots to the body. And he goes on a rant here that is absolutely scathing. Comes perfectly to our modern world. He looks at Athens, a wealthy, a commercial empire, and he asks, how do you know if a society is rotting from the inside out? It's not poverty. It's when the city is teeming with doctors and lawyers. Listen to this quote inside of the Republic. When licentiousness and disease multiply in a city, are not the courts of justice and dispensaries always open? And is it not a disgraceful thing to need medical help, not for wounds, but because by leading a life of indolence and luxury, one is filled with winds and waters like a marsh, end quote. Filled with winds and waters like marsh. Let me translate that into some plainer English. He's calling the average citizen, their body, a swamp, a cesspool. And here's his diagnosis. Too many lawyers means we have failed ethically. We failed because there's no internal justice. And without internal justice, we got external chaos. We can't settle disputes with our own neighbors like adults. So we need a judge. We need a nanny. We need a nanny state to decide and control everything for us. Too many doctors means we have failed physically. I'm not talking about trauma surgeons for soldiers. I'm talking about chronic disease. Back in a time when, oh my goodness, the levels of chronic disease could not have been anything like what we put in our bodies today. I mean, I'm sure they did have horrible disease and they had all kinds of epidemics, but he says, the type of chronic disease he's talking about is by leading a lazy, luxurious life, eating trash or eating too much, sleeping in, and then we run to the doctor demanding a drug to fix the swamp that we created inside our own body. Does that sound familiar? The CDC right now reports it's like 90% of our nation's 4.1 trillion annual healthcare costs are because of people with chronic physical and mental health conditions. Many of these lifestyle preventable issues. Not all of them, but many of them. We are the swamp Socrates warned about. We live in the Ozempic society. We don't want to do the gymnastics, or in our world, go to the gym, go for a walk, go for a run, just exercise. Heck, just get out of our chair, off of the TV, and put the stupid phone down. We do not have the discipline. We would rather have the medicine. We don't want to have that hard conversation with someone. We want the lawsuit. We want the nanny state. We want someone to cancel someone. We want someone held accountable. Plato calls this educating for slavery. Because if you depend on a doctor to keep you alive and a lawyer to keep you safe, you are not free. You are dependent. Now, I read this and the doctor piece I get 100%. We're the most drugged up society in the history of the world. And I don't even necessarily mean the illicit street drugs. I mean our legal drug dealers, the pharmaceutical industry. My God, these people push pills better than any street thug could ever imagine pushing pills. Jeez. Take a pill for A, then you need pill B to handle the side effect by A. Oh, then we get another side effect from pill B. So, you need pill C. Heck, before you know it, there are people popping 8, 10, 15 pills a day. It's insanity. It's insanity. We're told over and over and over again, exercise, healthy diet, walking, stretching, moving. Do those things and you can get healthy. And yet, our lazy, obese, pathetic selves in our country, all of us, we choose pills. Far too many of us, far too often. And it creates slaves. It creates slaves to the pharmaceutical industry. It creates slaves to bad health, slaves to the healthcare system. It's just sad. It's infuriating, and it's frustrating to watch. The other part, the tuning, soft versus savage. There has to be a balance. And Socrates talks about this for his guardians. He talks about music being the culture and the intellectual side of being a human, and then the gymnastics, which is the physical aspect. But for Socrates, it's not about being either a jock or a nerd. It's about tuning the soul. You've probably heard the term the warrior poet. He argues there are really two dangers in a society in getting these guardians up and running and able to help make sure our society stays just and a good and honest and prosperous place to be. If you only do the music side, if you only read and debate and feel, you become soft. Empathy is a good thing. Neurotic empathy is horrible for society. Because you become neurotic. You melt your spirit. You become the modern keyboard warrior. High anxiety, high IQ, zero agency. But if you just only do gymnastics, if you only lift, fight, eat, you can tend towards becoming a savage. You become a brute. You become a gym bro guy, narcissist, self-absorbed, that annoyingly machismo, Andrew Tate-ish style guy, because you lose the ability to reason or listen. So, the goal always for Socrates is, look, with our guardians in our new society, we need to find the golden mean. And he says this, quote, "He who mingles music with gymnastics in the fairest proportions and best tempers them to the soul might be rightly called the true musician. He is the demanding warrior philosopher." And the science backs this up. We know about BDNF, which is brain deprived neurotrophic factor. It's a protein, actually. Science has found it's a protein inside your body that acts like a fertilizer for your brain cells. And what triggers it? High intensity exercise. You literally cannot optimize your mind, the music side of things, without stressing your body, the gymnastic side of things. Plato knew it without knowing our modern science. And if you want to be intellectually dangerous, you have to be physically dangerous. You have to tune this string so it's tight enough to fire, but not so tight it snaps. What an awesome balance to shoot for in your own life, right? Be physically fit. Be strong. Be aggressive. Push yourself to the limits physically, but at the same time, push yourself mentally, intellectually. Develop both sides. But then we get a transition as we come to the end of book 3. And Socrates drops a bomb here. He's curated the movies, the mimosas, the imitation. He's built the gym routine, soft versus savage. But there's one problem left, right? Unity. How do we get all of these people, the rulers, the soldiers, the farmers, to care about each other? How do we get the guardians up to speed to make sure we keep everything functioning properly? How do you stop them from forming factions and civil wars? I mean, what a huge task. Look at that here in the United States of America today, 350 million plus. It's like people, you hear it all the time. We're so fractured. We're not together. We don't think the same thing. We're not united anymore. And Socrates sees this struggle and he wants to take this on. And Socrates hesitates and he tells Adeimantus, I don't know if I have the courage to say this. If you're in conversation with someone and you're just talking about something, and then your friend looks at you and says, I gotta tell you something, but I really don't know if I should say it this way or not. Well, that's where we're at right now with Socrates, as he looks at Adeimantus and he proposes the noble lie, or sometimes it's called the useful fiction. He says we need to tell the citizens a story to unite them, to bring everybody together. We need a myth, a unifying myth. We will tell them that they were all born from the earth, so they're all brothers and sisters. But when God made them, we need to also tell them he mixed metals into their souls. Gold for the rulers, aka reason. Silver for the auxiliaries, spirit and defense. Iron and bronze for the farmers and craftsmen, which equal appetite and economy. Now, people hate this part. It's like, oh, so you want to just launch a propaganda campaign that each one of these classes is endowed with certain skills, and you want to create a kind of caste system that will subjugate all the little people underneath. And I'm sure that may be what Socrates is thinking, and why he wanted to hesitate to say it, but he said it anyway. But let's look at the text closer. Socrates says this, quote, if a gold parent has a bronze child, that child has to be sent to the farm to become a farmer. But if a bronze parent, a farmer, a worker, has a gold child, that child must be raised to rule. Bringing him up, if he shows it incredible skills in combat and reason and all intellect, we need to elevate them. Wow. So on the surface, on the one hand, it sounds bad. On the other, this is meritocracy, right? You rise to the station based on your skills that you have. And before we judge him, let's look at ourselves. I want to double down on this concept of the noble lie, because I feel some of you probably are hearing this and resisting it. You hear noble lie and you think scam, you think propaganda. But you need to look at what, I'll give you another example. Yuval Noah Harari says in a book called Sapiens, if you want to check it out. He argues that humans rule this planet for one reason, and one reason alone. We are the only animals that can cooperate based on fictional realities. We're the only animal that can cooperate based on fictional realities. Let's get real about what a fact is versus a fictional reality. There are brute facts. These are non-negotiable. Gravity, that's a brute fact. Aging is a brute fact. If I stop believing in gravity, jump off a cliff thinking I'm going to fly, I'm going to die. Also, I can pretend I'm not aging. I can pretend I'm not getting older and that I won't die just from old age if I can make it that long. But hey, let's be real. We are all dying slowly, daily. Photosynthesis, that is a brute fact. The distance to the moon is a brute fact. But then there are social facts, fictional realities. These are the things that only exist because we tell a story that they exist, and we live by these stories. And yet these fictions that we have created in our lives, your life and my life. How do I say this? You and I are living in a fictional reality. You ever watched the movie Matrix? If you've never watched that series, especially the first one, my goodness, have a look at it, please, and really watch it carefully. One of my favorite all-time movies with Keanu Reeves. I mean, you can kind of have a little glimpse into what a fictional reality versus a brutal factual reality looks like. But let me give you some other examples in history to show you how powerful these stories are and how different they can be. I'll give you the Aztec cosmic engine. So to the Aztecs, the sun wasn't just a ball of gas. It was a god. Their sun god, actually, supremely powerful. He was constantly fighting a war against darkness. Every night had to fight a war against darkness. And like any soldier, he needed energy. He needed fuel to fight this battle every single night. For the sun to rise and overcome the darkness. And there was this precious water. Now, this water was not a precious artesian spring water that you buy for $5 in a gas station. It was human blood. To us, that sounds like insanity. But to an Aztec priest, sacrificing a captive or hundreds, if not thousands of captives in a festival wasn't a story. It was physics. It was maintaining the cosmic engine. And if they stopped the story, they believed the universe could literally go dark. That story, it built an empire. It built pyramids. It organized millions of people. Here's another story. Jump to the Middle Ages this time. Let's say you were accused of a crime. Middle Ages. Europeans back then, they didn't have CSI, DNA testing. They had a story called divine intervention. They would put a red hot iron on your hand, make you walk 10 paces with this iron on your hand. And if you're innocent, God, who is watching, he'll just intervene. And the laws of thermodynamics kick in, and he's going to heal your hand faster. But if it festers, God's not on your side, you're guilty. This was a legal reality for centuries. So what happened? People confessed for crimes they didn't commit just to avoid having a burning hot iron in their hand for 10 seconds. The story of God's intervention was more real to them than that burn on their hand. Third one, the mandate of heaven in China. In imperial China, the emperor wasn't just a guy with an army. He was the son of heaven, which was a common way of looking at rulers back then. He had this cosmic contract called the mandate of heaven. But here's the kicker. This contract could be revoked by weather. Weather. If there was a massive flood or a drought, the peasants didn't say, "Oh man, what bad luck." They said, "The story has changed. Heaven has fired the emperor," and they would overthrow him. A weather event became a political fact because of the story they told about it. Now look at us. Look at us. We find those fictional realities as funny or think, wow, how stupid and ignorant people used to be. Thank God we aren't like them. We are way smarter. We are way more sophisticated. You think we don't have stories? Pull a dollar bill out of your pocket right now. Touch it. What is it? Well, it's cotton and linen blend. It's got greenish ink on it. Can't eat it. Can't build a house with it. Suppose you could use it to start a fire. Be gone then. It has zero value as a brute fact. But if I give it to a stranger when I head out to a coffee shop, I'll give myself a latte. Why? Because myself and that coffee shop, we both believe the story of the dollar. We believe the fictional reality that this green paper is worth something. And it's so valuable, people will spend their whole lives chasing it, stressing it, killing each other over it, worrying about it for days, months, years. Geez, some people spend their entire life fixated on it. Over what? Over a piece of paper, cloth with green ink on it. If we stop believing the story, the paper becomes trash, becomes kindle for a fire. Maybe. Consider we need to check our ego and intellectual brilliance over prior civilizations at the door. So when Plato talks about the noble lie, he isn't telling us to trick people. He's telling us, choose your story very carefully that you want your city to be based on. Because if you don't have a shared story, whether it's the Aztec sun, the mandate of heaven, the U.S. Constitution, and our currency, you do not have a society. You just have a bunch of monkeys fighting over bananas. Socrates is simply admitting the truth. Societies run on fictional stories. And if you destroy the noble lie, the story that binds us together, the society dissolves. This isn't really for today, but another one. As you know, the Judeo-Christian worldview and the narrative of its importance fades, and it's been fading, sadly, for decades, if not over a few hundred years from its pinnacle. What is the story in our society that we are using to replace that foundational concept in our postmodern world? It's a big, big question. Just want to toss that out there. What comes after the death of God? The ultimate death of God. Nietzsche fixated on this one question here, but we're going to come back to that for another day. I just wanted to plant that seed right now. Okay, back to it. So the main question. The question isn't, is it a lie? Some of these lies that are told and society believes. The question is it a noble lie, or a lie that at least leads and pushes a society to a higher order of justice? Does the story produce gold behavior, or does it produce chaos? That's Socrates' fixation. Now, before we wrap this up with a nice little bow and say, okay, great, we just need a good story, I have to address an elephant in the room. I can hear you screaming at your dashboard, your computer screen right now. You're thinking, sure, Dr. Hopkins, a unifying myth sounds great, but who gets to write it? Who died and made you king, Mr. Socrates? Who gave you the right to look a million people in the eye and lie to them for their quote unquote their own good? That's a fair point. That's a fair point for sure. And this is the most dangerous jagged edge of the Republic. This is the moment where Plato gets really scary. And that's why he was so hesitant to even bring it up, because if you hand a government the power to define reality, to create the noble lie, you're betting everything. You're betting the house. You're pushing all your chips in that liar is a good person and has the desire to make sure that the least among the society are properly taken care of. You're betting that the person holding the pen is writing a story about justice and not a story about their own power. And history tells us that usually the guy holding the pen isn't a philosopher king, but a monster. We've seen noble lies go wrong. We've seen what happens when a society buys into a fictional reality that produces chaos instead of gold. Germany, 1930s. They had a noble lie. They had a myth of the metals, just like Plato. But instead of gold, silver, and bronze, they told a story about the Aryan master race. That they were genetically superior to all other races and needed to dominate. The powerful story for the Germans. It unified the German people in a catastrophic way. It gave them purpose. It made them feel like brothers, as long as you looked and talked like them. But it was a lie. A lie that led to the gas chambers. It was a lie that burned the world down. That is what can happen when the quote-unquote gold soul is actually a psychopath. Another example, let's look at Mao's China. They told a story that if they just believed hard enough in the communist ideology, the laws of agriculture would change. They told the peasants to melt down their tools to make steel in backyard furnaces. They created a fictional reality that ignored the brute facts of economics and farming. The result was not a just city. The result was over 45 million people starving to death in 3 years. So this is a problem. This is a problem for our protagonist, Socrates, because he is so confident in his own reason, so confident that he knows what the good is, that he feels comfortable playing God. He assumes that the people telling the lie will always be wise, good, honest brokers. But we know something. Socrates doesn't grasp or isn't really willing to acknowledge at a high level yet that power corrupts. If you give the ruler the power to trick their citizens for quote unquote their own good, eventually he's going to start tricking them for his or her own good. So we're left, as usual, at the end of a book in a really uncomfortable spot. We know we need a story to hold society together, but we are terrified of the storyteller. And frankly, we don't have a great answer for this yet. Socrates hasn't given us a safety mechanism. He sort of handed a loaded gun and told us to trust him. I don't know about you, but I'm not so sure I trust that just yet. So where does this leave us? We're at the end of book 3. We've learned that our minds are porous. We imitate what we watch. I think we can almost all agree to that at some level. You can research it yourself and find that out. I get it. I'm totally on board here. Where I spend my time and what I put in my mind matters, and it matters a lot. It matters a lot to me, and it matters a lot to you too. We've learned that a reliance on doctors and lawyers, that's a sign of personal failure in a society. When we get squishy, soft, and weak, we look for crutches. We look for physical crutches, forms of pills and treatments for our body from the doctors, and we look for mental crutches in the form of lawyers or rules and laws of the state, the nanny state, to protect and take care of us at every turn in our lives. Yuck. That's failure as well. We've learned we need to balance the scholar and the soldier inside of us. Yeah, I think it's easier to get on board here. We got mind, we got body, healthy, strong, active, creates humans of exceptional power and strength, intellectually, physically. A very, very, very good thing to have a society full of that type of guardian. And we've learned that we need a noble lie, a guiding myth. It helps keep a society on track. It helps societies rise. It does. The American dream. We talked about the Aztecs. They help raise a society, right? Powerful civilizations can come from that. But I don't know about you, this is the hardest one for me. Yes, I do agree we need that noble narrative, that uniting story to bind us together as a society. We need unity. We need togetherness. But my goodness. So I talked about earlier, humans have a terrible track record in this area, and it's ripe for corruption and propaganda, where literally millions have been killed, and it's unleashed untold amounts of corruption. Once again, you need to wrestle with all this. I really implore you, don't agree with me easily. Wrestle with these ideas and my opinions, and read the book or ponder it. Just ponder this podcast. Ponder it for yourself in your own life. Here's my challenge to you this week. If I can leave you with something completely tangible, be the guardian of your own soul. I want you to look at your life like Socrates looked at that scroll of Homer at the very beginning when he sat down with Adamandus. Take out that red pen. That show you're binge watching that makes you feel anxious and cynical, cut it. Those cable propaganda used to be called news shows. Stop watching them. That friend who's always complaining and making you feel weak, limit your exposure. Those TikTok videos or social scrolls that are just, let me be nice, icky, bad, nothingness. Stop. Just stop. That swampy habit that's driving you to the doctor or ruining your health. Fix the input. Program your biocomputer, or the world will program it for you. The world will program it for you if you don't take control. So next time we go on to book 4. In Socrates' mind, he has built the body and given the roadmap to build the mind. Next, he's going for the soul. We're going to map the human psyche in a way that Freud would actually literally steal concepts from 2,000 years later. I can't wait for it. I hope you'll join me again. I'm Dr. David Hopkins, and this is the Intellectual Freedom Podcast, and I'll see you in the next one.